So without further ado, I'm going to have Ms. Toria Turner, who is a member of our Detroit Health Department and our wonderful Cardiovascular Health Action Council. I'm going to have her to come in and speak, just tell us about her experiences as a community member. Without further ado, Mrs. Turner.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dailey, for this opportunity. I don't know if we can put the slides up or not, and if not, I can just go ahead and talk. So as a community member, as a mother, as an identifying Black Indigenous woman, I wanted to speak a little bit and very briefly, because I do want to be respectful of my elder that will go just after me, BIPOC, perinatal, and infant health disparities and the why. Perinatal mortality and maternity is basically a death that is defined as the death of gestational person while pregnant or within 1 year to the end of pregnancy. Okay, so basically what that means is we're talking about perinatal, we're talking about people who have died within 1 year from the end of their pregnancy. I am a mother, I've been pregnant, and I have had 2 children. I've lost children along the way. I'm a Black mother, and so I can identify with this. So if someone dies from postpartum hemorrhaging, or if they die from postpartum eclampsia, okay, this will be counted as that mortality and counted in that disparity, okay? However, if a mother dies in an accident or a car accident, unfortunately, any type of accident, a homicide, this is not counted. Okay, so I just wanted you to differentiate what is included in that statistic, okay? When we're talking about infant mortality, we're talking about the deaths of children or babies under 1, or under 1 that occurred among live births, okay? One thing that we're going to get into is racism due stress. White supremacy due stress. How does that relate to perinatal and infant health disparities? How? Why are there perinatal infant health disparities in Black and Indigenous communities? Racism, so next slide. Thank you. As you can see here, I've named a few, Dr. Opara has named them. Well, you will continue to hear about this. You will continue to see these phrases and these avenues of racism being used because they're very real. Individual racism, interpersonal racism, institutional racism, cultural racism, structural racism plays a strong part in perinatal and infant health disparities, in the health disparities of BIPOC people. Racism isn't just something that affects our mental well-being. It absolutely does. But it's not just that. We know that racism creates trauma, yes, but there's also a physiological thing that happens when we endure racism over and over and over again. And when cortisol is running through our body at all times, we have to ask ourselves, what is that doing to the body? It's damaging, isn't it? I want you to just picture me, little Black girl, right? I'm in school, and I'm trying to navigate school as a little Black girl. I'm trying to navigate these spaces. Then I grow up and I began to work, and I'm trying to navigate workforces as a Black young lady, as a Black woman. I meet someone, I become pregnant. And now I have to navigate space as a pregnant woman, a Black pregnant woman, all the while enduring racism the entire time. Now, before becoming pregnant, I was weathering. If you've ever heard of that word, weathering, if you know what that word means, please put it in the chat. I was weathering racism. Weathering, meaning worn down. Since a little girl, being worn down by racism over and over again because of how I look, because of the color of my skin. And then I become pregnant, and it does not go away. Sometimes it became worse, being a BIPOC pregnant person. my body continued to be worn down. And so I want you to ask yourself this: what did that do to my body? And not just that, but what did it do to my baby? What does this do to a BIPOC person's body when they are just living normal life and growing up? But then what does that do to a BIPOC birthing person's body and their baby? High levels of cortisol running through their body on a regular basis, because that is what happens when we are enduring racism. I want you to think about these things, and I want you to make that connection. So, next slide. When we're making that connection and understanding, thank you so much. When we're making that connection and we're understanding what the disparities, the racial disparities look like, for me, this is hard to look at. Some of you have seen this slide many times before. Maybe you've put it in your own presentations. And a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but we're going to talk about it. Black women in the US are dying at a rate 4 times higher than white women. It is true. And this is according to the Maternal Health Task Force, maternal mortality in the US from 1990 to 2015. And let me tell you, we are in 2022 and it continues. And in some spaces, Black women, Indigenous women are dying 12 times as high. And this is in relation to pregnancy-related mortality. This is the pregnancy-related mortality ratio. When our physiological health is at risk, when it is diminishing due to racism and white supremacy, let me tell you that it impacts our generations moving forward. Let me bring it home like this. It is impacting my sons, my daughters, my granddaughters, my grandsons. It's impacting and diminishing generations to come. So when we are discussing generational trauma, we talk about the people that hold the precious eggs, the people that have the uteruses holding the eggs, the children and the grandchildren of our future. Again, racism and white supremacy impacts an entire generational line of people. Dr. Cameron Phyllis Jones, epidemiologist and anti-racism activist, says and talks about racism-induced stress. She talked about internalized racism. An example of that is prejudice and discrimination against own ethnic groups, your own ethnic group. Personal mediated. An example of that, and I know all too well, a Black woman being treated different than a white woman in a doctor's office. And I'm sure there are many more examples of that. Institutionalized. An example of that, criminal justice, education system, the criminal justice system, employment, and the list goes on. One of my favorite people who I just enjoy immensely, she is on here right now, Dr. Vicki Sapp, has said time and time again, be a change agent. I leave you with this, last slide. Take a picture of this and please have these conversations and ask these questions in your space as you discuss perinatal and health disparities and as it relates to racism. I thank you for your time. How will you use your privilege? Have a good night. Thank you.